Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers CBO.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers CBO Knowledge Forum. I am so excited you all are here. I see a lot of people are still joining us, so I'm very, very excited about today. Today is going to be amazing. We have a special guest, and we also have our panelists that will be with us as well. But before we get to that, as you all are aware, we always start off our knowledge forums with a beautiful and amazing icebreaker. It's our way of getting to know you all the way through. So, since you all have joined us, I am going to launch our icebreaker. Now, please, at any moment, you should see it pop up in your on your screen. Feel free to answer. I usually give about a minute or two for everyone to respond. I'd love to know where you're joining us from. What do you produce or hope to produce on your farm/ranch? And what type of livestock do you raise or hope to raise on your farm/ranch? So, oh, and by the way, my name is Uchenaya Ogba. I am with the Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers. If you've been to any of our knowledge forums, you always see me there. Or if you've been to any of our in-person events, you've seen me there as well. So, yeah, thank you all so much for being here. Okay, I see one person has answered. Now I know there are way more of us. I see 8 of us are in on the call, and more are joining as we speak. So please feel free to answer. We'll love to get to know each and every one of you. We have about a minute left. So yeah, please just respond. And if you don't have an answer, that's okay. Just you can just tell us where you're joining us from, and that's all right. Um, if you want to produce, just tell us what your hopes and dreams are, what you want to produce. I think it's always great to learn about, how best we can assist our growers and our ranchers that are with us. And of course, we can always answer questions at the end of this today's knowledge forum if you have any questions regarding your growing methodology or your ranching methodology. So we're about 1 minute and 35 seconds. I see some of y'all are now responding. Thank you, thank you, thank you. 60% have responded. We have 20 seconds left. If you can, that would be amazing to finish up. And I will definitely count us down in a second to see what everyone is saying. So let me make sure I have, first of all, your answers open because I don't want to make sure I get it. So, and time. So I'm going to end that. And I'm going to see what the people say. What the people say. All right. We have a few people that have responded. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's see now. Okay. We have guests from Houston. Now, if I butcher this, I apologize. But Eustis, Texas, welcome. We have another guest from Texas, welcome. We have another guest from Lancaster, Texas, welcome. Lufkin, Texas. My girlfriend is sorry. My fiance is from Lufkin, Texas. I need to start saying that. We just recently got engaged. So welcome, Lufkin, Texas. We have another guest from San Antonio. That's where I reside. Welcome. And we have another guest from Walking Stick Ranch in Seguin, Texas. Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. And we have another guest from Palestine, Texas. Welcome. Wow, that's amazing. All right, so we have folks from Texas all over Texas. We're glad you're here, and that's who we are, the Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers. Let's see. Now, the second question: what do you produce on your farm/ranch, or hope to produce on your farm/ranch? Now, let's see what first guest hogs. Okay, hogs. All right. We just visited a hog farm recently, man. The team. I don't know if it's the same team member, same rancher that we met, but yes. Another guest, green leafy vegetables. I love me a good lettuce. Please, I probably need tips on how to keep mine going strong. Another guest said vegetables, tomatoes, okra, peppers, and kale. That sounds delicious. That sounds delicious. Another guest said produce. All right. Another guest said market garden, eggs, pork, homemade goods, and crafts. Eggs. Whoever you are, EA Williams. I need that plug. Eggs is expensive. But yes, I love that plug. Another guest says still working on my batatas, bonacho potatoes. Ooh, okay. All right. I'm excited for you. And of course, our third question was what type of livestock do you raise or hope to raise on your farm slash ranch? First guest said hogs, yes. Another guest says sheep, all right. Another guest said not applicable. The second guest says not applicable. Another guest said hogs, chickens, and cows. Eggs. I need some eggs. Just saying. And our last guest said raising longhorns and want to convert to beef cattle. That's amazing. Well, thank y'all so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and taking the time and effort. Um, we are joined by our panelists. Now, if our amazing panelists can join me on this call real quick. There we go. We have Arlena Brumfield with Solutions Advanced Agriculture. And we got our other team member, Uriah Israel, with Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers CBO. Woo! I need to get like sound effects for this, y'all. But no, I'm so grateful to have y'all here. Thank you for joining us. Now, I'm sure some of y'all are anticipating the man of the hour, the amazing man. Um, Now, I had a bio written, but you know what? I'm just gonna speak from the heart because this gentleman epitomizes community when it comes to our farm and ranching community. Um, we are excited to have our CEO of Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers, CBO, P. Wade Ross. He is an amazing gentleman that has been pivotal in advancing small farmers and ranchers in Texas and beyond Texas. Um, he is a traveler. He's a public speaker. He's a family man, and all around great guy, and a wealth of knowledge, especially when it comes to regenerative agriculture and sustainable agriculture within Texas. And today he is going to be speaking to about. Let me get this right now. He told me to memorize this. I didn't memorize this, but it's sun, sun, soul, poop, and rain. I think I got it all off, Phil. I think I got it all off. But yeah, everyone, please give a hand for P. Wade Ross.
Hey, hey, bro, you way too kind. You making a black man blush. You know that ain't easy to do. So cut it out, cut it out. But no, thank you everybody for being here. We're going to jump into this is actually a project that we launched with NRCS, and it's going to be part of our Soil Academy curriculum. So truly appreciate y'all for joining us tonight, and hopefully you get a lot out of it. It's not the sexiest topic in the world, but I'm sure once we get into it, you're going to find that it's something that all of us need to know, not just farmers and ranchers and land stewards, but even in these times, even, CEOs and economists and politicians, they need to know this stuff. It should be something fundamental. We're hoping to get it in our schools, so stay tuned. But let me share my screen, see if I can get this right. All right, you guys see my screen? Yes, okay, cool. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get going. I got too many screens up. I'm gonna move my panelists over to the side because I'm gonna put y'all to work tonight, so be ready. But what we encourage you to do in this training, in this workshop, to really get the best out of it, we do ask that you clear your mind because you're gonna hear some stuff some of you have never, some stuff that you're unfamiliar with or that you haven't heard before. So we just want you to relax, receive this information, and then we're going to be sending out a recording so you can rewatch this and go a little bit deeper in your free time. But we just want you to relax, take this information in because it is so important. So I'm going to start off with a question to my panelists. Can you tell me what is an ecosystem? Oh, and by the way, if you all want to join in the chat, feel free. We're going to open this up to Q&A at the end where everybody can participate. And in the meantime, just to keep things rolling, I'm going to pose these questions to the panel, but feel free to put something in the chat if you would like. I love that participation as well. And I'm sure Uche will be looking out for it because I can't see it.
Okay.
All right, panel, what do you got for me? What's an ecosystem?
I don't know. I can take it if you want. A community of organisms, all different types, along with the non-living parts of that same community and the different cycles. But the whole community of living organisms that interact with each other in that same system, and the physics of that environment also.
All right. And you guys, not everybody has to answer, but since you're right, knock that out of the park. We're going to go with that. You're absolutely right. An ecosystem is simply all living and non-living things that interact in an area. And in many cases, they all depend on one another. Uriah did a knowledge forum last month, and he really talked on that about how nature impacts it. Nature works as a whole, and everything you do impacts something else. And we're really seeing it in the news today, which again goes back to the importance of understanding how an ecosystem works. It's so fundamental to everything, not only us farmers do, but what everyone does. Every child, every adult, again, every business owner should have a fundamental understanding of how our ecosystem works, because we only have one Earth, y'all. And if we tear this thing up, guess what? It's going to impact, you're going to find as we share, it's going to impact everything else. And, for me, I always look at an ecosystem and measuring the health of an ecosystem, very similar to how you would look at your own body. And, sometimes you're feeling good, sometimes not so good. And just as you saw in some of those news clips right now, some of the stuff y'all seeing in the world, we was about 20 degrees a couple of days ago. Now we're up to 70, 80. That stuff, off and on, so be it, but it's becoming more and more prevalent and common. That tells you something. It tells you some things are off balance. So just like if you were, if you went to a doctor, actually, let me ask. So anyway, the same way we check our vitals, as Elena was saying, I'm going through the next part of this presentation actually is talking about that, giving you some examples of how, just like our body, we can check our ecosystem. And there's 4 mainstays that we use to measure our ecosystem. It's the water cycle, the movement of water and how it affects living things. Mineral cycle, how the movement of nutrients below our feet and above the ground affects everything. And biological community. And when we say biological community, we're talking about biodiversity, having a community of plants and living things and animals. I think Uriah usually refers to it as living roots as well, all joined together. And the more we have, the more stable our environment is. And we'll talk more about that versus having a monoculture, which has come pretty prevalent in our farming community. And then last but not least, we're going to give you some examples of energy flow, how the movement of energy from the sun impacts everything that we do. So we're gonna jump in. The other thing that's very important to know is that these 4 processes apply to any and every environment, y'all. So this isn't something that just applies on your farm or, out somewhere. It applies in the desert. It applies in the tropics. It applies everywhere. These four principles. And the other thing, just like Uriah shared in his presentation on how nature works as wholes, if you modify one of these processes, one of these functions, one of these vitals that Arlena is referring to, then it changes and automatically changes all four of the others because they're all interconnected. And that's something that most people don't understand, they don't know, but that's why we're doing all four together, because if you impact one, you impact another. It's just like your body. If something's hurting on your body or your heart's not acting right, the rest of your body tries to compensate for it, and it just impacts the whole flow. Same thing with ecosystems. So keep that in mind. And going back to ecosystem, because that is a word we're going to be using all through this. Again, it's just talking about the environment and how these four main processes impact everything, whether it's living or not. All right. So the other thing I want to say, because it does one vital function impacts all other fours, it's important that when we're viewing our property, whether it's a garden, whether we have a farm, pastures, whatever we're growing, and we want to start measuring our ecosystems, it's important to look through the lenses of each one of these four, just like you're putting on a set of glasses for one, but you're still viewing the same property. So for the beginning, the first one that we're going to take a look at is we're going to put on the lenses of water cycle. So imagine yourself looking at your farm or looking at your garden, and you want to measure the health of it. You're going to first put on these water cycle goggles. So I'm going to ask our panelists another question here. I told you I'm going to put you on the spot. Arlene, I thought you were trying to disappear there for a minute. So here's my question. Is God making any more water supply for this planet?
No, sir. Not at all. No, he is not.
That's right. It's supposed to replenish and be a revolving cycle.
Yeah,
As
the
we
same
learn in
water.
mathematics.
You are absolutely,
The
y'all
same
are
water that was
absolutely
here at
right.
the beginning is still here.
That's right. That's right. Look in the chat. Do we got anything in the chat? Any answers in the chat?
No, straight
You
up
already
no.
answered. So they
That's
probably
right,
they
man.
ain't gonna go against y'all, but you're absolutely right. There's a fixed amount of water here on this earth, as far as we know anyway. So because he's not making, the Lord ain't making any more water, it's very important for us to understand. Matter of fact, it's probably one of the most important things that we understand how it actually works. So I'm going to, as Arlena said, try to give an example by looking at what you see on the screen there. So here's what nature's design is. Rain, or maybe it's hail, or even snow falls from the sky to the land. And once it hits earth, it should soak into the soil. It also should run from the soil, down from the soil into the streams and into our ponds and our lakes and our reservoirs down below. As you see, those little rocks you see down at the bottom there, that's our reservoirs, our aquifers. And also, some of it will, as you see the arrows shooting up, they're going to go back up into the cloud, but it shouldn't be all of the water that comes down. It should be a proper balance if you have an efficient water cycle that's going on. And as you can see there on the screen, you can see also that there is grass, and there's not really any gaps in the grass, as you see there. And underneath the grass, what do you see? What do you see, panel?
Roots.
That's right. You see roots. And when you see roots that go that far down, that's a perfect water cycle, because it means that there's a overall balance not only in the air based on how much is evaporating back up in the clouds, but also going back down to our streams. And if you have good soil, which we'll talk about later, what it also does is it filters the toxins that are coming through. So if there's anything such as acid rain with good soil, it automatically rinses and filters that back down to our water and our streams versus some of the stuff that you see. Now, in an ineffective cycle, it's going to be a little bit different. Whenever you get rapid rainfall, where it's just falling out of the sky like crazy, and you don't have a good system, an effective system, what happens is that water puddles. It doesn't run off. It's going to puddle right on the ground, on the top of the ground, usually because there's not good soil or it's compacted, meaning that there's not deep roots. And I use pretty much the picture I use probably is not the right picture you see on the screen, because those roots are going pretty deep. But in an ineffective cycle, you don't have deep roots, and what's happening is more water ends up getting evaporated back up to the clouds. And what happens is it also runs off to the streams, because the ground is hard. It's not penetrating into the soil. And guess what? It's not getting down to our aquifers and to our rivers and other places the way it should. And it's not filtering good quality water. If it is getting down there, it's running off to the side and bringing not only topsoil, but toxins with it, especially if we're spraying our crops and doing certain things like that. The other thing is that what happens when you get too much water evaporating up? I'm going to ask my panel what happens when you get too much water evaporating back into the sky. Any guesses? Oh, the audience, you can guess too. You can put something in the chat.
We actually have Elizabeth commented, and she said, the Arctic and Antarctic were supposed to be our reserves, but we messed up so bad the universe is tapping into those. Overheating is what occurs when, I think that's her answer to the over evaporation into the sky. Manning said precipitation.
Absolutely. I agree with all of it. And we talk about ecosystems, and in this training, we're talking about ecosystems kind of under the view of it being our own farm or whatever. But technically, and you guys would probably agree, the earth encompasses one entire ecosystem, and everything that we do in one place, I believe, impacts everything else. So, but that answer is perfect. What it does is when it's evaporating at a too quick of a rate, and the soil beneath, and we'll talk about the soil and the mineral cycling here in a sec. If it's evaporating too fast, now we got more rain that has to fall again. And when that happens at too rapid a rate, what happens is you have flooding, and also, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have, if you're getting too much air and not enough rain, we also know what happens is drought. So all this really illustrates the importance of an effective and efficient water cycle, because at the end of the day, as farmers, what we want, our goal is to keep as much of the water in the soil as we possibly can, so we can grow things and grow things healthy. So I'm going to give a quick example of this. We went on a trip last May with just a group of our training cohort, and we went out to a sheep farm in Rogers, Texas. And the days leading up to the trip, which is on a Saturday, I think Thursday and Friday, it just rained like cats and dogs. It rained like crazy all throughout central Texas. And so as we're driving out there, we can literally see the water standing on every farm as we're approaching the sheep farm. And because typically most people, especially if you've been farming for a while, you've depleted your soil. So it's not functioning the way it's supposed to. So we're literally almost 100% of the farms had water. It was flooding, just standing on top. I mean, and so we drive up to the farm that we're attending, and it's a regenerative ag, use some of the practices that we talk about all the time, and they do everything natural. And one of their big things is water, is making sure their water cycle is efficient. Sure enough, as we're walking up, as we're driving up on the shuttle bus, we're going, where's all the water? So we soon found out where that water was. As we walked out, we could literally, out on the field, we could literally feel the softness, the sponge. It basically was a sponge beneath our feet. The water, as you can see here, while everybody else around us was covered, you couldn't even see grass. Their water had filtrated they had an effective water cycle. It went down into the soil, and they had sheep there, and they're growing stuff naturally. We'll share more about how this relates. But their sheep were laying down very comfortable. They were full, and their operation was going like clockwork while everyone else was out of work or inoperational because of flooding. So you can see this is just an example of how important it is and how efficient it is to have a solid water cycle. Got my man Uche coming back in, I see. So what are some of the things that we can do to mimic nature and improve our water cycle? Some of the things that we can do are keeping our soil covered with plants or things such as mulch. But the biggest enemy you can have when it comes to water cycle is bare ground. You don't want to have just open ground where you planted, where you created a garden, but you got a bare soil that's exposed. Because what happens when water comes down and hits that, it creates compaction. And when your soil is compacted, your roots can't grow down, to illustrate what I illustrated in that water cycle. So another thing that you can do to mimic nature is you can add more native plants, which tend to not require as much irrigation. So, or you can add seed. If you're creating a small garden and you see you got some bare area, maybe you opt to do seedlings or transplants versus doing the seeds, unless you have some type of mulch or things like that are going to protect the soil. The mulch and the litter and things and the plants that protect the raindrops from hitting the soil work just like your skin works. People don't realize it, but your skin is like an organ on your body to protect you. Arlene, what happens if you lose all your skin? What will happen to you?
If you lose all your skin,
yeah,
you just raw. You just go bleed, scab, disease, infections. I mean, burn up, all of the above.
You probably die.
Yeah, you die. Yeah, without skin, you die. So if you wonder sometimes what's going on with your garden, you ain't doing it no favors by keeping it exposed and bare with soil. You want to make sure you protect that, because what happens is something called capping, which means that if you're not protecting your soil, it's going to turn hard, like a hard shell, which creates runoff, and it's not going to penetrate down to your roots. So that's water cycle. We only have so much time, so I'm gonna go to the next one. I feel like I spent too much time. Oh, I got a raised hand here. What's going on, Arlene?
Okay, we have a few comments here about the water cycle. Elizabeth, that's an excellent point. She was contributing to some of the things that contribute to the water cycle. So she put cloven hooves and natural animal waste. So yes, when the animals, those are things that contribute to the soil, that lets the water stay in the soil. Then is ground cover better than bare ground?
Yeah.
When I said, she was asking a question, is ground cover better than bare ground?
Oh no, I was letting you ride. Go ahead, you ride.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Cover crops is much better than bare ground all the time.
All the time. Just remember, like we use the
We have a couple
analogy
more
of skin.
comments. Huh? Oh, yes, yes, yes.
No, I was just
And
saying, remember the analogy of skin. If you
that's right.
lose your skin today, you're gonna die.
Yes, so ground cover is absolutely better, Roz. And then Janet says you will dry out if you didn't have your skin. And Roz said our skin is our largest organ. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
in comparison, we can say that soil is our largest living organ for the earth. Yes, yes, yes.
All
Awesome.
right. Any more on the list?
No, that was it. You can
All
go
right.
on to the next cycle.
All right. I apologize. I'm out here in the country. I'm got a little delay going on. So sorry if I talk over y'all ahead of time. All right. So let's go to our next set of lenses that we want to put on, and that is mineral cycle. So another question for my panel. I told y'all I'm gonna put you to work. So here's a question. Do we need to add minerals to our land to grow our plants effectively?
Trick question. Da, 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 da.
That's a
Thank
trick
you, Ryan. I'll back you up.
bag. Oh man, if the mineral cycle is working properly, you really don't need, if you had like livestock and the plants pulling up the nutrients, then also decomposing back into the soil, you should be fine without adding any outside chemical fertilizers or any other additives.
And I'm going to add that the earth it was already self-sufficient to have the minerals it needed. So in the event it was lacking minerals, it will correct itself. So I don't want to say too much because I want to get into this presentation. So what we don't realize is those weeds are coming up to balance those minerals. Unfortunately, because we don't have an effective mineral cycle, we do have to supplement. But take it from there, Phil.
All right. So those were good answers. Here's the deal. We already, when it comes, there's a difference between minerals and nutrients. Minerals are those things that are already in the ground. Right now, we have thousands, hundreds of thousands of years worth of minerals. They're already there. The myth is that we have to go add minerals to make our plants grow. The reality is when we add minerals, those plants, and we spend all that money on fertilizers and everything else to add mineral content to it, the plant uses less than 10% of that. Okay, because it's not natural. Sure, if it's starving, you might see it take off, but then then it's gonna die. It's like a person who, a little kid who eats too many popsicles or something. They bouncing around, then they just crack. So there's a difference. The key thing to understand is the difference between minerals and nutrients. And the key is to give the plants minerals through nutrients that are in plant edible form. Okay. That's called a mineral cycle. Some people call it a nutrient cycle as well. And the only way to really do that is through photosynthesis, where the plant receives energy from the sun. What that plant's going to do is put out sugars. We call it sap, but it's basically just sugar. And I'm trying to speak in plain English. Arlena and Uriah, you the plain English police. So if I say something too technical, let me know. But usually I'm not that smart, and I don't have a gift of gab, so of wordsmithing. So I usually say things pretty basic. So basically the sun, when you hear photosynthesis, don't be afraid of that. All that means is the plant is grabbing energy from the sun and it's turning it into sap, into sugars. Above ground, they typically call it sap. Below ground is typically called sugars. And what the plant does, it knows what its body needs. It knows what its nutrient deficiencies are. So it gives off the sugars that are going to bring the bacteria, the microorganisms, the fungi, the nematodes, the protozoas, all these things you see in the picture, over to it that have been eating on the organic matter from the top that has seeped down into the soil. So it's pooping it out. That's why we put in the title poop. You all thought we was talking about manure on the top of the ground. We're talking about that too, but below the ground, these plants are giving off sugars that are attracting these same microorganisms that are going to bring and poop out the nutrients, the minerals that are in plant edible form for them to be fed, period. That's what it's about, okay? So you already have all the minerals that you're ever going to need on any square foot of ground that you're standing on. Trust that. The Lord's already taken care of that piece. It's up to us to create the environment, okay? The environment where these microbes below the ground and above the ground, as we'll talk about later, because it all is tied together, are working together to create that plant edible nutrient that your plants want. And they're going to give off the sugars, the saps that are going to attract what they want as far as those nutrients. So y'all got that? I got a hand up.
So let me go back here to the chat.
And while you're waiting for that chat, so I hear certain things. I think someone asked me the other day about rock dust and all these other things. Understand that people will, if you're buying, they're gonna sell it to you. That's all I'm gonna say there. But that's why we teach this, and it's so important for everyone to have a fundamental understanding of not only how the ecosystem works as a whole, but these functions that we're talking about, these four main functions, because so often we're preyed on based on what we don't know. Go ahead, Arlene, I'm sorry. Oh, you're muted.
I know, I was trying to wait for that noise in the back to go away. Letitia Solomon pointed out, could you explain what those arrows are? But can y'all put in the chat if you didn't really catch it? Because she asked the question right as you were demonstrating what these arrows mean coming from all these organisms to the soil back to these organisms. Can you just briefly touch on that, Phil?
So the arrows represent dependence and consumption. All these creatures that you see here below ground that we typically never even pay attention to, we can't really see them because even if you get a shovel and pull it up, you're not going to be able to see them, are dependent on one another. So all these arrows are doing is just showing you the cycle, the food web below our feet. Most of us focus on the food web above ground, the fact that we need plants, and our plants, we either eat them directly or feed them to our animals and they eat them, whether we're eating, chickens or, livestock or fish or whatever, there's a food web that they have to make them nice and healthy so we can consume them. It's no different below ground. Everything is interdependent. I'm going to put a pin in that right now because we're going to talk a little bit more about that in our upcoming function. But everything is dependent on everything, and that's really what these arrows are for. It's just telling you that everything feeds on everything else, and sometimes that very thing you think is a pest and that you kill off, and then you're wondering how come your garden is not working, it's gotten worse. It's because you killed off something that's related to this food web, and that very thing that was thriving, that was eating that thing you killed off, is no longer around anywhere. They disappeared as well, and we've disrupted the food web. We went from 100 things in the food web down to 20, and as we'll talk about in our next function that I'm going to show you, that greatly impacts what's going on at your dinner table. Did I answer that okay?
Sounds good. She said, I got it. Someone says, right. Makes sense. Arthropods feed on cow poop and bird poop. I think that's right. Awesome. Really quick before you transition to the next one, What is the most common thing that we do in our practices that depletes this life cycle? What is a common tool and action we do on the land that we think is the best, but it interrupts
Okay,
the
I
cycle?
got a slide in there, but I'm gonna hit that since it was asked. So some of the
Wait.
things that we do, one of them I just shared with you. Sometimes someone convinces us that we have a pest problem and we kill off. You can't just kill off one thing without killing other microbes that are essential to this food cycle. Minerals are constant. Minerals and these animals that you see, these microbes are basically our livestock below the ground, even though they're microbial. And they're constantly on the move, and they're all constantly bringing minerals and nutrients to our plants based on what our plants need. But if they don't exist, then guess what? We have low quality pastures, we have low quality gardens, our plants aren't as healthy as they should be, and our animals who are eating those plants aren't as healthy as they should be, because we're interfering with what nature does naturally. Number one. The other thing is disturbance. Sometimes, we're so anxious to get in there and till everything up and turn everything over. Well, what lives down there? What have we just done? We just destroyed the very animals, the very organisms that are helping us create the plants and the gardens that we want. So those are some, we can go on, but those are some of the things. Hopefully y'all are getting it. Like I said before, please lean forward. You're going to hear some stuff you haven't heard before, because some of that may be on purpose, but we're coming up on a time where we all need to know how the principles of knowing how to grow our own fresh food naturally. And this is some of the things I'm sharing with you are what our grandparents did and what our ancestors did before the Go Green movement of post-World War II came about. And then we all decided, hey, we're going to do things a different way. I'm not going to go down that road too hard because I don't want anybody to feel bad or anybody to feel beat up. But these things have to be shared so you can make that decision for yourself. So thank you for asking that question. Is there another question out there, Elena? See, Elizabeth Williams has her hand raised. Was that from Elizabeth?
Actually, she may have her hand raised. Elizabeth, did you all have your own hand? Because I put mine down. So Janet the gardener says, so you are not supposed to turn over your compost with a pitchfork? And Elizabeth's okay. That was just a question from Janet.
No, I would say this: be careful with your compost, because those are living creatures. Definitely you can turn over the pitchfork because it hasn't been applied to your garden. So it's not in the ground, which is the environment you want it to thrive in. So sure, you can turn it over with the pitchfork. Don't be too hard on it because there are living organisms in there. And also one other tip is when you're watering your compost pile, don't put it on high spray where it's spraying out at a high rate. Just mist it, because those are living organisms that are in there and you want as many of them to stay alive as possible. I know when I first started, I just sprayed everything hard, but you want to be careful with that. But excellent question.
You all set, Phil? They're
all
good
right.
to go.
We'll go to the next. I do want to point out something, because the compost was just mentioned, and we also talked about mulch and ground cover. I know Uriah talked about leaves, and I know he's done several Tuesday Seeds and blogs where he's talked about the importance of just letting your leaves and ground cover be, because that serves because it's covering up and it's going to break down. Now, with that said, it's important to know, and I think Uriah said this in his last presentation as well, is that there that not every environment is created equal. Everything, even though we're talking about these principles applying everywhere, there is a brittleness scale that doesn't change these principles, but may change how quickly these principles work. For instance, if you're in a non-brittle environment, that's an environment that's like a tropical area like Hawaii or whatever, because, or even in areas like South Padre, where the air tends to be moisture, things are going to break down quicker. So when things are going to break down quicker in moisture environments just on their own, then you may or may not need to add such things as compost or animals. We'll talk a little bit about that later on, living organisms to break it down. Now, however, if you're in a dry climate like West Texas or El Paso, where everything is pretty dry, or New Mexico, it's more and more important that you're keeping the ground covered, okay? Because you want things to break, things aren't going to be breaking down as naturally as they would in a place like South Padre or Hawaii, because of the moisture in the air and the brittleness there. It's not, things don't turn green quite as quick. So just keep that in mind. There is something called a brittleness scale. I don't have a lot of time to go too deep into it, but that is something to take into consideration, especially if you're talking to a gardener who is, you know, in Tyler or Lufkin, and you're sitting there in San Antonio. Totally different. If you're in San Antonio, you're in a drier climate. So you're going to need to do some of these principles at a larger extent than someone who's in a different climate than you. So just keep that in mind as we keep going. I wanted to point that out. If there's any questions on that, hit me up. But again, very important that we focus on the world beneath our feet. When we're talking about the mineral cycle, what generally happens is it's broken down in organic matter. You see the cover here in this picture. This is just things that are dying, plants that are dying and decaying. And ideally that seeps down and is taken into the ground by some of those microbes that we talked about. And here's a look at what healthy soil looks like close up underneath our feet. It's not dirt. This is not dirt. You can see pathways. You can see different, it's almost like a marbling type of situation where there's airways, because living creatures like soil need air. What else do they need? They need water. They need pathways. And along the way, they're bringing nutrients with it down to the lower roots. So very important that we're building our soil up in the mineral cycle to look like this under our feet. And here's just we always ask the question, what's the difference between dirt and soil? Can anybody tell me the difference between dirt and soil?
One of the guests earlier actually commented.
Yes.
When you were talking about water cycle and minerals, she did say if it was depleted, then it just becomes dirt. And I believe that was Elizabeth.
Absolutely. And for the sake of time, I'll go ahead and answer that one too, just like you did, Arlena. It's very simple. Dirt is not alive. Soil is alive, as you can see there. That's the difference. So it's our job to build an environment where the dirt becomes living, active soil. And we kind of hit on this a little bit, but some of the things you can do to mimic nature to make sure that this happens, because in places like Amazon forest, this stuff is happening naturally without any help from human beings, is number one, we talked about it earlier, just like water cycle. If you see bare spots, try to get it covered. You can do it with mulch. You can do it with hay. You can do it with adding plants. There's several different ways you can do that. We talked about reducing the disturbance on the land. Some people do that. You hear this huge movement with no-till or low-till. And really what that is talking about mineral cycles. It's talking about making sure that we don't disturb the world beneath our feet, and do things such as promote biological breakdown, especially based on your brittleness scale. And always, the more roots, the better. All right. So next, we're going to jump into putting our next set of lenses on. And we're still looking at our same land, our garden or our pastures, whatever that looks like. But now we've slipped on our biological community. And really what this means is that you want to have a diverse, as much as possible, have a diverse set of living organisms on your property. So I always ask a question at the beginning of each segment. So I'm going to ask my panel, is a weed a bad thing?
No, sir, not necessarily. A weed is like an indicator of the nutrients. It's allowing your soil or your soil to talk to you and let you know exactly what it's needing, and it's also letting you know the condition of the soil. But it's not a bad thing.
All right, good answer, good answer. So I was gonna say it depends. Because really, the definition of a weed is something you don't want in your garden. So going back to what you said, it goes even deeper, which is defining what a weed is and understanding the role of that weed and why it's there. So very important. And the reason that I asked that question is going back to what you just said, Uri, is biodiversity. The importance of having a difference of a variety of different living creatures. So often, some of us who were brought up in conventional ag were told everything has to be monoculture. Anything that's not monoculture is farming ugly. Having a something else out there besides the ideal forage that you want your cows or your livestock to feed on, or if you're growing crops, anything outside of that is a bad thing, and not necessarily true, as Uriah mentioned. So it's a really within the eye of the beholder. If you're looking at maximizing your ecosystem, you want to make sure that you have as much biodiversity, as much living roots, living animals, living things that are out there in the place that you're growing on. Okay. No, it sounds crazy, but what happens is when you reduce the biology community, biological, I can't even talk tonight, y'all, community, and it gets too simplified, what happens is you have an unstable environment, okay? So it's very easy. If you only have one set of crops, then guess what? You only have one type of roots that are going into the ground, which is attracting only one set of microbes, and one which is now attracting one set of insects or birds or all the things that we talked about. And going back to this slide, going back a little bit, if you could look at this picture here, this is an exercise that we did at one of our boot camps, I think in Dallas, or maybe it was San Marcos. And we always do an exercise where each one of those strings you see there represent some type of living thing or living creature. Maybe it's a caterpillar, maybe it's an earthworm, maybe it's a bird, maybe it's some kind of fungi or bacteria. But with everything on there, the more you add to it, the more stable it becomes, and I can sit that ball right on top of there. But what happens when I start taking things away? Maybe I see too many I feel like I see too many grasshoppers, which should never be the case. And I want to kill them off. Okay, well, whatever was eating that grasshopper also goes as well And as I start taking these strings away, what happens to that ball? It's unstable. It falls through. And that's what we want to, that's what we're talking about. You want to see as much variety of living roots in your gardens as possible. Okay. So the more you can put in there, the more you can put in your pastures, and the more that you can see the variety, it's going to bring more microorganisms. It's going to strengthen. It's just like what we talked about with DEI, this thing with DEI that the government's all of a sudden trying to get used to, diversity, equity, inclusion. The more diverse it is, the stronger our nation is. You know, the more diverse these companies and workers are, you know, it leads to stronger communities, and it's no different with soil. So keep that in mind. A lot of times, this is kind of what our farm looks like right now. It drives my dad crazy because he's old school, and he's used to what you see over here. But this is what it looks like right now, y'all, and that's on purpose. And to be honest, a lot of times what we're calling weeds are 10, 20, 30 times more nutritious. And guess what? They're growing naturally because they're supposed to be there. And guess what? I ain't got to pay no extra dollars to fertilize or grow any stuff. All I had to do was put in the right practices in play, and our livestock love it. Okay, so you be the judge. So is it okay to farm ugly or not? You be the judge, but guess what? The more diversity that you see above ground, it means it's 10 times stronger below ground. So some of the things that you can do to mimic nature when it comes to the principle, the process of biological community, or I like to call it dynamic community or living creatures, whatever you want to call it, is to add different species of plants if you need to. You may not even need to. You may just need to allow things to grow that you're calling weeds. There's something that we didn't get into in this training called succession, that the stronger you make and build your soil, the stronger you're going to see some of those natural indigenous plants coming back. Have diversity, add in diversity, especially in times where it's a low growing season. Some of you are growing crops, you know, try to do cover crops or things like that that grow better in certain times of the year or certain weather. Okay. Next, I'm going to jump into our last piece, which is energy flow. But I guess before I'm going a little bit fast, y'all, because we're getting low on time. Now, energy flow, I got a question for our group.
Oh, well, real quick before you switch cycles, you have a couple questions from the chat. Uriah, can you see those?
I don't see any questions. I don't see, I'm looking in the chat, I don't see anything, but maybe I'm doing
okay.
something.
That makes sense.
No problem. If they come, we're going to do an open Q&A. So if someone come, I'm trying to make sure I get too long with
Absolutely. We'll come back to it. It'll still be there.
Yeah, I get too long with it sometimes. So I'm running out of time here. But I'm going to ask y'all a question. What type of farming requires sun?
Oh.
Yeah, good answer. Whether it's trees, whether it's vegetables.
That's right. Heathen Hog said all in the chat.
Yeah.
Yes, that's actually Sarah's her real name.
Whether it's livestock, whether it's wildlife, it all needs sunlight. Okay. And basically this graph just kind of shows the importance of sunlight. But as I said earlier, it takes, without sun, then you can't grow anything. There's no energy. And it takes energy to grow plants. It takes energy from the sun that goes into the plant, and that plant gives off saps, some that go to that some of our rodents feed on, that go into some of these secondary consumers as well. Also, it feeds directly down below into our plants, into our root system, giving off those saps. But none of that happens without solar energy. Okay. And I've heard some people go, well, wait a minute, Phil, I'm able to grow plants under a light, and that's great, but you're probably not getting the highest quality of plant nutrient if you're doing that way. Some people don't agree with that. I'm just letting you know that science, they have done research on this, and you're not getting high. It's good because, hey, it is something, and we do have to figure out other ways to feed our communities. Just understand there's nothing better than, so there's no substitute for sunlight. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And it converts everything we have into food. Okay, all starts with the sun. So when we're talking energy flow, really what we're talking about is creating ways to increase sunlight. Okay, and I'm going faster here, but some of the ways that we can increase the flow of energy, the flow of sunlight, is one is that we can establish deeper root systems with different types of plants. The other thing we can do is we can lengthen our green plant canopy, because when we're talking photosynthesis, it's talking about sunlight into green plant. So maybe we can lengthen the growing season, like we said before. Maybe we can grow plants into our soil in both warm and cool seasons, which is going to continue to build up our soils all year round, versus maybe, it's wintertime and we just don't put anything in the ground at that time. Another thing we can do is increase the density of our plants. You see at the bottom where it says wide leaf areas of plants. We can increase the size of the leaf, almost like a solar panel type of thing. So if you're opting for covering more spaces, maybe you have some bare spaces in your pastures or your gardens, maybe you fill that and you plant some broadleaf plants to create more energy flow. Okay, because at the end of the day, when we're talking about the 4 ecosystems, it's really about capturing as much sun as we possibly can. It's really about keeping as much soil as much water as we possibly can in our soils, because we can't grow without water. And it's about really not disturbing that world beneath our feet that is doing, once we build our soil to the right place and continue to monitor it, it will be literally doing the farming for us in upcoming years. So I went fast in the last part there, but as you can see, all these things are interdependent. They're connected to one another. And it might be a bad analogy, but I like to use the analogy of a boxer, a good boxer. You can look at a guy like Mike Tyson, who not only was he was a knockout artist, but he also was, he was great on defense too. But it was all one motion. If you watched him fight, when he was doing defense, it would seamlessly turn into offense. Where he throw a punch or an uppercut or a counter punch, all that stuff was based on balance. He figured out through years of practice, he figured out what the best balance, where his equilibrium, where his center of gravity was, where he could become a champion fighter. And we need to do that same thing with our ecosystem, using these 4 processes. And again, these processes apply to everything. They apply to every growing environment you can think of. There's not one that they don't apply to, and they're all interdependent on one another. So with that said, if I rushed a little bit towards the end, I didn't go down as many rabbit holes as I typically do on this topic, but I wanted to, our goal as an organization was really to give you a high level, because hopefully you would agree everybody should understand how not only what an ecosystem is, but what these four processes are and how they tie together and how important it is to understand these before we ever make any decisions as land stewards. So with that said, I am going to be quiet and open it up for questions.
Okay, we have a few here. Uriah said he can't see the chat, you guys, so forgive me if y'all are tired of this New Orleans accent, because I get tired of it sometimes.
Oh, no
Okay.
worries. You're right. I mean, Uche, it was me last time.
Yeah. Okay, so in the chat, I'm kind of gonna go from the bottom and then back to the different cycles. Sarah with Heathen Hogs has shared a resource in the chat you all can check out. It is about UVA and UVB rays and digestive changes in animals. She has a pig farm and she specializes in snakes and special containers. So you could check out Sarah with Heathen Hogs. She has an article here about ball pythons and pigs. So Ray is a pig farm on here. You might really enjoy those digestive changes in animals. I told her, share, we love knowledge. Next we have, okay, I'm gonna come back to that, Letitia. I'm coming to your question. When we were talking about the weeds, someone asked, isn't a weed, Angela said, isn't a weed subjective?
Yeah.
And I said you should elaborate. How is it good and bad?
I'm gonna let Uriah take this one.
Man, that's a loaded question. And I'm gonna say like what Phil said earlier, it depends, right? And so like if you're growing, if you put together a bed to grow a particular fruit or vegetable, and all of a sudden some unwanted plants show up and just start taking over, those might be considered like undesirable, right? But if you're walking in a field and you see these plants that are there naturally, just volunteering to come up there, they might be a medicinal herb that you just are not aware of, right? And they are indicating exactly what's going on with your soil, what's needed, what could be used there, and so they are literally talking to you. And so it's just I know that George Washington Carver said like a weed is really kind of like just a plant out of place or a misplaced plant, but they all have their benefits. And so I just gonna leave it like that. And like once again, it depends, right? It depends.
Yeah. And I would like to add that if you kind of take and do a little bit of homework on that weed that's popping up in that space, you will find that it is telling you a story that's going on with your soil. So dandelion is the most common that you see in the urban space in the city. Dandelion is an indication of calcium deficiency, and it also likes to grow in compacted soil. So if it's telling you is there, it actually has a lot of calcium in its roots, and it gets a really deep, strong root. Because if you try to pull a dandelion that's been there for a while, you might have to really, really pull, right? It's doing the job of correcting that space. So you considered it a weed. It is medicinal, it is healing, but it was there to correct that calcium deficiency in that compacted soil. So why not mimic nature? Why not put that dandelion right back in the soil? Because that's what it was trying to do anyway. And so that's what Phil is trying to show by mimicking nature, that nature was already correcting itself. So Tisha says, oh, so what else is, oh, wait, hold on, let me come to it. Goat weed used for. We don't know them all. You go ahead and look that up, Letitia. Let us know. I have an arsenal,
I'm
index
sure it's
cards,
telling you
books, and
something.
notes on herbs and medicinal plants where more than half of them you think they are weeds. They are originally thought they were weeds, but you look into that. I know goat weed is actually pretty popular in Chinese medicine, so we're not gonna talk about that on this call.
It
Now
depends.
there was
It
another
definitely
comment
depends.
about excellent forum, said Mr. Israel.
Yeah.
The thumbs up from Angela, great job from Ray. Thank you guys, great job from Willie. UVB effects on the animals is very shocking, says Sarah from Heathen Hog. That is something very interesting we can look into. Actually, the digestive system and effects on animals affects all the cycles that Phil has shared here. Then we see here. Okay, Letitia had a question.
Hold up.
Really?
Who asked that? Because I don't. Can you explain to all of us what UV the
Oh,
UV
yes,
thing?
yes. Sarah, would you like me to explain that, or would you like to unmute yourself and elaborate on UVA and UVB rays, which is very important now with climate change and our poor ozone? Would you like to let me watch the chat and see what she says? I'm gonna say yes to you, Janet, and I'm gonna come back and mention that. The Plant In app. I'm just taking up time while Sarah has a chance to unmute. The Plant In app and explore your land. Yes, yes. Sometimes it doesn't go deep on those weeds, Elizabeth, because I actually use that app a lot. Sarah, you can't come on. Unsure how to unmute. But UVB is specifically in a section of light. So I'm gonna share. Just to make it easy in layman terms, because Sarah is a friend of mine and she and I can really geek out on y'all. So we're not gonna go.
Yeah, don't geek out.
We're not gonna go that far. But UVA is dangerous. They can be dangerous, and the A commonly stands for aging. Then UVB is another type of ray. We're exposed to both, and the UVB rays can cause burning. So UVA and UVB are certain type of spectrums that come in that are normally protected through the ozone. The ozone and the ecosystem in the solar system and way up in the sky was designed to protect us. But because of excessive carbon pollution, our ozone became thinner and thinner and thinner, and to the point where it is dangerously almost not even there, non-existent. So those rays coming from the sun that normally are filtered through our ozone are coming against us, and that's how come we have such high rates of skin cancer, burning, and it's also why some of our plants are just traumatized. So where it was normally a sunny day, now it's kind of like infernal sunny day. Those are because of those UVA and UVB rays. And so what Sarah is saying is, oh, she's unmuted. Let's keep it really simple, Sarah. Did you feel like I covered it pretty well? She said, got it.
Kind of. So UVA and UVB actually have their necessity in all living things, UVB especially. With UVB, it helps convert vitamin D to calcium. So in that narrow band in all of the light spectrum, which is going to be your UVB, which most of it's not visible light to us, but it's there down like 280 to 320, I think, nanometers, but it's not really visible to us, and it basically helps us convert vitamin D to calcium, so it helps grow stronger bones, and it also helps plants take vitamin D out of the soil or out of the rest of the sunlight and convert it to calcium, which, depending on the plant, will affect a lot of things, especially when you get into your tomatoes and squash and things like that. So it's really important. Yeah, that's it. It's just like a really, really important part of the spectrum. And the fact that a lot of like factory farms and things don't supplement with UVB, or like they sell full spectrum, quote unquote, lighting, but it's usually not far enough into the UVB spectrum where it's providing the correct light range in order to create that vitamin D to calcium connection. So you have to be really careful with lights. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Right.
She brought up some very important points that we wanted you to pick up from this ecosystem, this whole cycle. You want to mimic nature. So when we purchase things, buy things, there's new innovative things on the market. You want to mimic nature as much as possible. So she pointed out when you're using synthetic lights, and you're buying these things that are quote unquote organic, that you may be just doing something a little bit too far away from just what's natural. It's already there. So using as much sunlight, as natural sunlight as possible, using the nutrients, building the soil, making sure it recycles that water, all of those minerals and living organisms are there that Phil mentioned in all those slides, the bugs, the trees, all those arrows are what makes it healthy and more nutritious. So she pointed out that false light might interrupt from vitamin D. Right now, people of color all around the world have the highest deficiency of vitamin D. We have gotten away from mimicking nature. So that is excellent points. Thank you so much. Now we have some more questions popping up. That
Hold on,
opened
wait.
up something.
Hold on, hold
Please
on,
save the
hold on,
chat.
hold on.
Valuable information in the recording. Yes, everyone will receive a link to this recording by Uche. Once you're registered, he can automatically reach out to you and it will come to you as soon as it's ready. Next question. Is rainwater still safe? That's Janet.
Oh man, can I take that one?
Please get it, Uriah.
Absolutely. Rainwater is probably the safest water there is. Let me see. You have your three types of water. One is your groundwater, which is coming from your aquifers and your wells. Number two, you have your surface water, which is your ponds, rivers, lakes, and such. And then rainwater, which is coming through the sky, which is distilled, receiving all kind of nutrients, minerals, and it's the purest form of water until it hits the ground, right? And then like it might pick up some stuff from the ground, but it's the best water that you can possibly get. And we should definitely be harvesting it if not. If not. I hope I answered that question. Arlena,
Yes.
I had a question. You mentioned something about deficiency for vitamin D, and I wanted to know what's your solution for that.
Oh, you go ask this is one of my favorite topics. Holistic healing of the body. Yes. So guess what, you guys? The solution, oh my God, I could be so corny. The solution is the soil. So, like what Sarah pointed out, the whole cycle process is so interrupted with chemicals, exposure to our plants, not having healthy soil and those living organisms, and all of these artificial things that have made the living cycle that Phil has demonstrated here so broken. You can become you can fix that vitamin D deficiency by making sure that you are eating food that has less manipulation and processing to it. You want to return back to nature. Get into that sun, get that solar energy. It is that UVB ray she mentioned is a part of the full cycle of making vitamin D. But she also shared an article about the effect of the digestive system on animals because of the UVB rays, where our gut is affected as well. You have unhealthy guts where that breakdown of microorganisms, just like it's in the soil, is in your digestive system. And if you have eating processed foods, manufactured foods, you need to return to eating whole foods that have come from the earth and have not had this chemical exposure. It will clean your gut out and you will properly break down vitamin D coupled with the sun. And that's how I'm gonna keep that short. I'm just keep it short right there.
I did have another fulfill. What are some ways that you can that traditional farm? What are some traditional farming methods? How can they be adapted to align with natural biosystems? What's some
Um,
ways that we could? Yeah.
that's I mean, when you say conventional farms, how it can be adapted.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
Um,
like, yeah, we've been growing like a certain way all of our life. Now you're sharing this. So what
yeah.
are some basic things
Well,
that you say, like, you can do this and really kind of bend it back?
the most there's two main things. Number one, get educated. Because if you
Mhm.
don't know, if you're just picking up stuff, there's so much out here on regenerative ag, and people aren't investing time to really get educated on what is what. So what's happening is they're getting, because everybody know regenerative ag is like this new wave, especially with the cost of fertilizer and some of the other ways of farming, especially for limited resource farmers. that they're trying to take shortcuts. They're not investing the time and energy to really understand, to be on these calls and really understand, okay, now I understand ecosystem, what's next. Get educated on what soil health really is, because what people are doing now is they're selling people so much. I get so many different calls. Hey, Phil, what about this? What about that? And it goes back to what Arlena says, is there a natural option? You know, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I don't even know. It may be great, but is there a natural option? Because if not, you're going to be depending on something that's going to make someone else rich over and over again, because you're going to have to keep coming back to the well. And as you see, nature works as wholes. If I'm using something that's not natural, I'm probably impacting the other processes. And guess what? I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that I at least have doing the fundamentals right. Number one. Number two is start small. If you're a conventional farmer and you've learned to farm a certain way, especially if it's feeding your family, but even if not, if you got 100 acres, don't go out and buy 100 acres or 50 acres worth of cover crops or seeds or all that. Start with a small space, a small garden, learn the principles, learn the brittleness scale, and how that applies to your place. Maybe you need more compost. Maybe you need less. Maybe you need to add animals, based on what you already have out there. Do a short trial with a small herd of animals and start putting these principles together. And this is just the beginning. This is just like yours, you're right, you did last, is just understanding the why behind the what. And the reason why we're starting with these, even though everybody's pushing us. What about the compost? How do I do that? How about the land grazing? We'll get there, y'all. But if you don't understand the why behind the what are you going to do the second you hit a speed bump? You're going to go back to do what's familiar and normal, because you haven't really taken ownership of the why, on some of these things. And you don't have to take ownership, but we do want you to understand these principles. And like we said, whether you're a child or you're the president of the United States, you should understand the ecosystem, the place that you live in, this world, before you ever make a decision on anything, because everything you do impacts the ecosystem. So, did I answer that okay?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
I know we're short on time. We got about 4 minutes. I want to ask one question before we leave, and just to get the wheels churning. And that question, because it comes into regenerative ag quite a bit, do pests and disease attack plants that are healthy?
That's for us.
That's for everybody.
Generally, no. What do you guys think? And I'm glad you brought that up. Not as much. That's right. If you have a healthy immune system, you have a healthy body, you eat well, you're strong, fit, are you likely to get sick and to be attacked by, disease, or they're predators that come to live off you? A lot of them said, yes, not as much. I think so. I'm not sure. Uriah, you want to comment before we?
Yeah, all the above are. I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna answer it only because we're short on time. We only got 3 minutes, but all the above is correct. If your plant is at maximum health, just like a healthy body, it's going to fight off. It's going to be healthy enough to fight off disease, just like anything else. Pests, anything that you think of as insects, they like decaying things. Just think about it. Any insect, they're going to feast on decaying stuff or things that have low immune systems. That's when they attack. So when people say, well, Phil, why are you leaning so far into soil health? Because if you create a series of healthy plants, and nature's going to get his, don't get me wrong. there's going to be stuff that dies. There's going to be stuff that isn't healthy out there. But for the most part, if you have healthy soil, you're going to have healthy plants, which are going to be disease free. And guess what? If your animals are eating those healthy plants, whether it's foraging or whether it's you've turned them into the garden, then they're going to be healthy. And guess what? It's going to be a cycle over and over again where you're just building healthy soil. When they poop, what are they pooping out? They're pooping out healthy organisms that don't have as much pathogens and things in them. So keep that in mind. I'm going to end there. Uche, are you back or are you
I am here.
All right. I'm gonna let you take us out.
Struggling.
We can hear
Sorry,
you.
Yeah.
Anything special from you?
I'm having a lot of technical difficulties, but everyone, please subscribe to the Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers newsletter to stay up to date on our upcoming events and industry news that we share on a weekly basis, as well as follow us on social media as well, where we highlight different events and activities going on within our community. Thank y'all so much for showing up. And we appreciate your support. All 25 of y'all. I think it was 26 at some point. And with that, be the exception.
Woo! Be the exception, guys. Have a great week.